For a few hours, the Ourang Medan looked like a solvable disaster. A distress call was reportedly heard in the Strait of Malacca. A ship was reportedly boarded. Bodies were reportedly found. Then the vessel caught fire, exploded, and sank before the scene could be properly examined. Everything after that had to travel by retelling. That is why the case still works, not because it gives us too much evidence, because it keeps losing the evidence it had. The most repeated version of the story begins in 1947. Later accounts say a Dutch freighter called the Ourang Medan sent a broken radio message. The wording varies slightly from source to source, but one line survives almost everywhere. All officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then a final line, "I die." Later retellings most often name the American ship Silver Star as the vessel that answered the call. That detail matters, but only to a point. There is no surviving audio recording of the distress message, no single contemporary report that closes the chain cleanly. What survives is reported text, preserved after the fact. So before anyone steps on deck, the case already has a problem. The signal is memorable. The signal is not secure. Even so, the boarding account is the reason the story spread. Later descriptions say rescuers found crewmen dead across the deck, in the bridge, and in the chart room. No visible wounds, no sign of a struggle. Faces supposedly fixed in fear, arms held out or raised, as if the crew had frozen in the middle of one last reaction. Some of those details may have sharpened in repetition. That matters. Maritime legends rarely stay plain when people keep retelling them. But the core image does not need much embellishment to work. A ship was reportedly reached in open water. Its crew was reportedly dead. No obvious explanation was visible at first glance. That is already enough to make the next event decisive. Because if the story ended there, someone might still have been able to test it. If the event happened broadly as described, the strongest explanations are not supernatural. They are chemical. A buildup of toxic fumes could explain sudden collapse without the kind of external trauma people expect. It could explain why multiple crewmen went down fast. It could explain panic spreading through enclosed compartments and then out toward open deck. And if unstable or hazardous cargo was involved, it could also explain the fire that reportedly followed. This is why the case has long attracted theories about dangerous freight, poison gas, chemical leakage, explosive cargo badly stored in heat and salt air. The problem is not that these explanations are absurd. The problem is that the supporting cargo details are unstable. Some retellings become very specific about what was supposedly in the hold. Others do not. The further the story travels, the more confident the cargo list seems to become. So the strongest explanation remains conditional. If the boarding account is broadly true, toxic atmosphere and dangerous cargo explain more than any paranormal reading. But the case does not let us keep only the strong parts. This is where the story becomes harder, not easier. A real maritime disaster usually leaves paperwork behind. Registry traces, port references, insurance history, newspaper chains that can be followed backward to firmer ground. The Ourang Medan does not behave like that. What survives is a thin documentary trail and a much thicker retelling tradition. Researchers looking for registry confirmation have never produced the kind of clean paper trail that should close the argument. The name drifts between languages and spellings. Later summaries often cite earlier summaries instead of stable original filings. That does not prove the ship was invented, but it does place the case in a bad historical zone. Too specific to dismiss casually, too unstable to lock down. And once a story enters that zone, every later retelling gives it more reach than weight. So the Ourang Medan survives because every stage that should have settled, it failed in sequence. The signal was heard, but not preserved. The boarding was described, but not secured. The ship was reportedly reached, then lost. The name was remembered, but the record never hardened around it. That is why this case feels different from a normal ghost ship story. It does not ask you to believe the impossible. It asks you to sit with a disaster that may have been real, then slipped into legend because each piece of evidence disappeared one step before verification. In the end, the most haunting thing about the Ourang Medan is not the dead crew. It is how close the case came to being knowable.